life as we know it has changed irrevocably, and that in this seismic shift lies an opportunity to turn things around, improve our world, and make life better for the majority, especially in poor countries. It is time to reboot Nigeria. This is Pivotal. The highbrow and affluent estate called Victoria Garden City of BGC in Lagos was in the news on the 2nd of August because officers of the National Drug Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, had shockingly discovered a meth lab in the estate, producing some 50 kilograms of the drug every week, with plans to increase the capacity of production to at least 100 kilograms per week. Meth, a strong and highly addictive Class A substance, affects the central nervous system and is thought to be one of the deadliest forms of street drugs available. According to the NDLA, the affluent estate also had what they described as a network of distributors. It would appear that there is an increase in not just the drug trade but also use in Nigeria. At the time of the announcement of the BGC raid, the NDLA also said another meth lab was uncovered in Nise community of Oka local government area of Anambra State. And according to the agency, the price of this dangerous drug is as high as $500,000 per kilogram in the international drug market. So does Nigeria have a drug problem? And if so, how bad is it? What are the issues that are leading to the spike we are seeing? What is the impact on communities? And are the authorities winning the war on drugs? For answers, I'm joined on Pivotal today by Mr. Femi Babafemi. He's the Director, Media and Advocacy of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and Mr. Eze Eluchi, the President, Civil Society Network on Substance and Drug Abuse, and also Chair of the West African Network of CEOs on Substance Abuse. Gentlemen, welcome to Pivotal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I could start with you, Mr. Femi Babafemi, does Nigeria have a drug problem, and if so, how bad is it?
Well, I'll tell you categorically that indeed Nigeria has a drug problem, and I would rely on the National Drug Survey of 2018 and the activities, arrests, seizures, and prosecutions of the agency in the past 16 or 18 months to draw this conclusion. One, in 2018, there was a drug survey which showed that 14.3 million Nigerians between ages 15 and 64 had abused drugs in the previous year. That comes to 14.4% prevalence, and that is 3 times the global average. So that gives us a clear picture that indeed there is a drug problem in Nigeria. And when you also look at the activities of the NDLA with the reinvigoration of the agency since January 2021, between then and the end of May this year, there has been over 17,600 arrests of drug offenders, in addition to over 3.5 million kilograms of illicit drugs seized. That is huge. That also paints a picture that indeed Nigeria has a drug problem. But then the good thing is, after the result of the National Drug Survey in 2018, indeed President Muhammadu Buhari set up the Presidential Advisory Committee on the Elimination of Drug Abuse, which coincidentally was chaired then by Brigadier General Mohammed Buba Mara, who is currently the Chairman Chief Executive of NDLEA. And so if you look at what has happened between then and now, there is, I would say that indeed there has been quite a lot of efforts to curb and cut down on the figures of those demanding for drugs, as well as cutting access and availability of these drugs.
So before we get into what you're doing about that problem, I think it's important to get into understanding how it is that Nigeria ended up with averages that are above what is considered the global average. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Eluchi here what his assessment is of the drug problem in Nigeria, both from a usage point of view, but also from a trade point of view.
Well, thank you very much. The assessment that Mr. Babafemi had just reeled out are very factual and they are very scary, but it will only get worse. And the reason for that is this: we have not done the basic things that should be done. It is commonsensical that prevention is better than care or than arrest or whatever else you're doing. And in all our efforts at the national level, at the state level, we have omitted prevention. We have omitted prevention, reaching the grassroots and letting them, preventing this scourge. Mr. Ojodu reeled out arrest statistics, seizures, which are wonderful on themselves. But the fact is this: the usage, you're not preventing the people from using, you are only arresting, you're seizing, doing all that stuff, and people will continue to use. That's why we are in this mess we are in now. We have not done the basic, the fundamental. And how come we missed out that issue? We missed it out because when the drug problem became prevalent, when it became very visible, our first reaction was knee-jerk approach. We decided to do arrest, interdiction, and all that stuff, which has immediate results. It results in arrest, it results in seizures, but it does not impact on the usage, on people assessing it, people going for it. So we have not done prevention, and that is why we are where we are. And we to keep on getting worse. Like
let me bring in Mr. Babafemi here, who had started talking about the work that this particular administration was doing around containing drugs. This issue of prevention that has been raised by Mr. Eluche is part of even a wider global debate that is going on around how to contain drugs. So there are those, for example, who feel that punitive measures like custodial sentences, particularly for users, are not the way you deal with a drug problem, and that in fact, in addition to prevention, even after usage has started, and they believe in rehabilitation. So can you talk us through the policy that government is pursuing and whether there are elements of these things that we are talking about contained in that policy, or if the government is convinced that the only way to deal with this is through punitive measures?
I'll tell you categorically that indeed the government is pursuing the drug issue on a lot of frontiers. One, in the area of drug supply reduction, which was what I mentioned in my statement earlier, where I was talking about arrest and seizures. But then, more even visible or more than even the area of drug supply reduction, the NDLA at the moment, and that is the government through the NDLA at the moment, is doing so much in the area of drug demand reduction, which I believe is what Mr. Eze Eluche is talking about. And that was exactly what prompted the launch of War Against Drug Abuse, WADA, on June 26, 2021, by President Buhari. That is the World Drug Day in the Villa. And what this has led to, we have quite a lot of initiatives that has come out of this. One, you would have seen the strong advocacy from the agency, quite a lot of visits to community-based leaders down to the grassroots. In all the states we visited, we made sure that we had to talk to faith-based organizations, religious leaders, as well as traditional rulers. All of these are geared towards mobilizing them to take ownership of the war against drug abuse. We need not deflect our responsibilities as individuals, as stakeholders. This is a collective effort, because whether we like it or not, this is not all about NDLA or about the president or about the individuals or an organization, even as a government as a whole. Two, you would have also seen that the agency has been pushing for drug integrity test for students, drug integrity test for job seekers, for political office seekers. All of these are geared towards cutting down on demand for drugs, because when people know that They are going to be tested, even though it is not in the law books. But then we believe that through advocacy, because just like we have people, couples, prospective couples going for HIV/AIDS test, going for genotype test, yet it's not in our law books. But then they believe in their own interest, they have to do this.
Let me ask Mr. Eluchi, as a civil society advocate who's spending a lot of time, energy, trying to see how not just him, but other civil society organizations can actually contribute to dealing with the drug problem. Are you fully satisfied with these steps, particularly the newer steps that have been taken since this administration launched this new initiative? And this is me asking you to basically assess the work that is being done right now.
Well, I will not say just under the leadership of Amaro. I will say even the legislative context in which the NDLA operates, in which we are attacking this issue of drug abuse. Way back in the year 2000, my organization had a conference with the National Assembly where it was realized that it was only in Nigeria that the issue of drug abuse, drug law enforcement was under one umbrella, that there was need for a distinct entity that will address the issue of prevention, drug demand reduction, and other issues associated therewith. But we still have an NDLA that caters for prevention, treatment, care, rehabilitation, law enforcement. It's not possible.
Why is that diversity, in your view, important? Could you explain why it is important to have more than one agency, and why that separation between those who prosecute and chase drug dealers is different from prevention and all of that? Could you explain that?
Yes. Mr. Babafemi has just reeled out what they've done on drug demand reduction. Now, what I talked about was prevention, not even drug demand reduction. Prevention precedes drug demand reduction. But why it is important to have a distinct agency is this. If you are going for rehabilitation or for treatment, and you are coming to a center and you have uniformed armed personnel of the NDLEA, it already creates a stigma. I mean, it affects the ability to even assess such centers, despite the wonderful intentions of the NDLEA. The fact that they are uniformed armed men creates a stigma that impedes people who seek to approach even the counseling centers they have in the NDLEA. That's why it's critical that you have a distinct agency that caters for other issues and let the NDLEA cater for the very, very important role of law enforcement, interdiction, and arrest of these traffickers.
Let me ask Mr. Babafemi here. Mr. Babafemi, is the NDLEA against the creation of other agencies whose focus would be prevention and rehabilitation? Or do you believe that everything can be taken and done effectively under your agency?
Let me answer this way. As it is at the moment, the NDLA is the lead agency in drug supply reduction, which is the law enforcement. But when it comes to drug demand reduction, that is, NDLA is just a part of many other stakeholders like the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, quite a lot of, including NGOs. The National Drug Control Master Plan 2021 to 2015, to 2025, clearly states all of this, where individuals, including NGOs, civil society organizations, religious leaders, all of them have roles to play. So it's not about an agency of government alone. It's about all of us. It's about all the stakeholders. So if, for instance, you probably notice that NDLA is doing this, doing that because we are out there pushing for some of these things. But for us, we believe that every other person also needs to come out and take positions, do their own, and collectively we can salvage the situation and sort out this issue. For us, so we're not so much interested in about taking or doing everything, which we cannot even do. Like I said before, even the entire government cannot solve the problem alone. It's something that takes collective effort. All of us, all the stakeholders needs to come on board and do what they ought to do in their own areas of influence.
Thank you, Mr. Babafemi. Now, often in order to solve the problem, you have to understand why it exists. When we come back from the break, we dive into the reasons why we've seen a spike in drug use and drug trade in Nigeria and what the impact is on community. and whether those who are charged with actually policing drug crimes are themselves sometimes culpable in amplifying it and making it a bigger problem for the country. Don't go. Advocacy of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and Mr. Eze Eluchi, the president of Civil Society Network on Substance and Drug Abuse, and also chair of the West African Network of CEOs on Substance Abuse. And we are talking about Nigeria's drug problem. Now, before the break, we talked about some of the ways in which this government and also the new laws that we have are trying to tackle this problem. But Mr. Eluchi, I wanted to start with you. Why do you think we've actually seen a spike in both the drug trade but also drug use in Nigeria? Because often I find if you don't understand why you have a problem, it is very difficult to try and find the answers, no matter how well intentioned you are. So what do you think is responsible for this spike that we're seeing?
Well, the reason is very obvious. We've never done prevention, and that is why there is people an uptake in it. And what is prevention? Prevention differs from prevention. You have to know what are the predisposing factors to addiction. Now, these predisposing factors, when you don't address these predisposing factors, there will be an uptake and there will be an increase in the number of people who are using drugs. And when there's an increase in the number of people who are using drugs, then there will be more demand, there will be more traffickers, the crimes, everything will flow. So because we have not done prevention, and I think Mr. Bafemi agrees with that, evidence-based prevention practices. Prevention is not just to print campaign stickers, run around streets, distribute logos or leaflets. No, prevention it's strategic. You have to plan it. There is early childhood intervention, midlife, adolescence, workplace interventions. You must do prevention, and if you don't do it, and you only do drug demand reduction, you will be reducing demand of drugs while people are flocking into to use drugs. So that is why the issue of having a dedicated agency.
Mr. Eluchi, I'm listening to you,
yes.
And what I seem to be hearing you say is that we need some sort of national program that basically looks at drugs beyond what is going on now, even education perhaps in schools, in churches, from the homes, a holistic program that embeds prevention of drug abuse into every facet of our life. Would I be right that that's what you are looking at? And if so, how could it be done?
You will be right. And good. I mean, there are best evidence-based practices which are out there. We're not reinventing the wheel. One of them, for instance, is even impacting on mothers who are childbearing ages to prevent them from using alcohol, which affects the unborn child and makes him predisposed to using drugs. So if you don't have any national policy that addresses women of childbearing age and they ingest alcohol at a very carefree level, they have children who have a propensity to use drugs. I've just mentioned one, impacting on women of childbearing age. There's a system where you can address children at primary school, secondary school level, and it is not by mere campaigns or distributing leaflets. There is a parameter.
Let me ask Mr. Babafemi, because I assume he has the data. What are you finding in the course of your work in terms of, we are talking a lot about usage here, so we'll start with that. What sort of people are you finding that are using drugs? So the meth lab, for example, that you found in the middle of what is a really affluent area was really shocking to people, because many people associate meth with sort of working class areas, with places that are poor. And so finding this was a bit of a shock to people. So who are the users? What's the profile of the users in Nigeria? And what is the profile of the traders? Do you have that sort of information available?
Before I come to the profile of those who use drugs, I quickly want to remind viewers, and again, probably draw the attention of Mr. Eze to the fact that there is a National Drug Control Master Plan 2021 to 2025 that actually addresses the areas he's talking about, that is prevention. And that takes here, because there are he mentioned the issue of predisposing factors. There are quite a number of predisposing factors that For us to address all of those issues, we all have to come together, starting from the family unit to the society, to the religious organizations, to the schools, parenting, all of this. Having said that, when you talk about the profile of those who abuse drugs, I'll tell you this cuts across all, strata of the society, whether the poor, the rich, they all take drugs. But then predominantly, we know that this it's common in those communities where you have the poor population. And that's why we recognize the fact that poverty or lack of jobs or other related issues are a major predisposing factor that expose people to.
You're saying that our declining economy, without doubt, is contributing to the spike we've seen in drug use, at least.
Absolutely, there is no doubt about that, and that's why recently we had to invite all the wives of the state governors to Abuja on to train them on drug prevention, treatment, and care (DPTC). For 2 days, the NDLA, in partnership with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime (UNODC), brought all the wives of the governor just to make sure that we're able to carry them all along what they ought to do. We know quite well that the federal government has a program of uplifting about 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. All of these, we need them cascaded down to the state level, local government level, down to the community, so that we can
go on, because we've spent a lot of time talking about usage, and yet there's given the fact that we started this program talking about the fact that you have basically done a raid on a meth lab, there's a supply side clearly that is problematic for this country. So, Mr. Eluchi, can I ask you, do we have a rough idea of why we're beginning to see the entrenchment of, drug trade within the Nigerian space? Because in the past, it used to be that people bring in these things. With these meth labs that we are now uncovering, it looks like Nigerians themselves are now fully getting into the business of manufacturing drugs that are harmful. What insight can you give us about why we have this development? What exactly is going on?
For starters, we have to appreciate the role the person of Buba Marwa, the NDLA chairman, is playing in all this, because he has brought in a great deal of passion and zeal towards tackling the issue of drug abuse. It wasn't as if these things were not there before. They were there before, but nobody was doing their job. So we have to appreciate
so you're saying we've always had a trade and a manufacturer problem. It's just that we never knew them being arrested and caught.
That is the fact. In Imo State, at Mbidi, there are meth labs all over the place. That is why we call them Urumuni in the southeast. There are meth labs all over. So it is good now that under this leadership of Marwa, there is more passion and more zeal towards addressing it, but it's been there for a long time. But the issue is this, like Babafemi pointed out, it's all encompassing. If you don't address with disposing factors, poverty, unemployment, lack of means, you have these people continue to do this. That is why we should not always rate the success of our efforts on drugs in terms of interdiction. Because if you do interdiction and arrest, in a little while, you have over 1 million Nigerians in jail for drugs. And if you trace it, most of them are doing that because of poverty, not having means.
You're essentially saying to me a lot of the drug use we're seeing is people essentially finding succor out of their sort of everyday problems through drugs. That's what I'm hearing you say. And that is why you must deal with the underlying.
Yes, but that is not all of it. Because there are some who, even when you have addressed all the predisposing factors, they still have that tendency to use drugs. So those are the ones that will not deserve punishment. But when you start by punishing, you may end up punishing the entire population because you've not addressed the factors that will make them amenable to use drugs. We are doing this for Nigerians. We are doing it for ourselves. We're not doing it for what accolades the international community will give us. If you Nigerianize the war or efforts against drug abuse, you realize that you must devote substantial resources and efforts towards prevention.
In dealing with the drug problem, Mr. Babafemi, Nigerians tend to be a little bit suspicious of people in positions of authority whose job it is to deal with our problems. Recently, we saw the high-profile case of a police officer, Abakari, who's been fingered and as we speak is actually in jail facing charges of collusion with drug dealers. Can you honestly tell Nigerians that this is a isolated case? Because many actually believe these problems are more common than we think they are, or that the administration would admit they are.
Yeah, the fact that at least we have today about 12 barons and high-profile individuals facing prosecution for drug offenses. As part of the over 17,000 arrests in the last 18 months, it's a confirmation of the fact that indeed there is this problem, and that indeed concerted efforts are being made to make sure that anybody, no matter how highly placed, no matter who you are, whether in the law enforcement or in any sector whatsoever you may be, you would definitely face the consequences of your action. So that is why we bring the individuals and we try as much as possible to separate them from the organizations they represent and ensure that the individuals face the music.
Yeah, finally, let me go back.
Let me just chip in briefly to what you said.
I want to actually ask you a specific question.
Yes,
because you need a group of NGOs that are regional. You know what I mean? And dealing with drugs and stuff. So I wanted to find out very quickly the sort of work that you're doing in collaboration with people that are not in Nigeria but are also concerned because you share a region and a sub-region. How is that working out, and why is that important?
Well, it's important because of the nature of the ECOWAS protocols, free movement of people, goods, and services. So if we don't have all the CSOs and agencies on board doing the same thing at the same time, you may do all the good work you are doing in Nigeria, and then because of the problems in Niger Republic or Benin Republic, all you do amounts to naught. But regarding to what Mr. Babafemi said, look, the budget of the NGO is a national disgrace. The number of staff the budget of the NDLA is a national disgrace. The number of personnel they have in the NDLA who are tackling this drug issue is a national disgrace. Babafemi should tell Nigerians the NDLA needs to be beefed up. The budget is not what any serious country that wants to tackle the drug menace should be dealing with. NDLA is underfunded. Have you gone to any of their offices? Have you gone to any of their headquarters? I mean, all their state commands. It's pathetic. If we are serious about the war against drugs, we should fund the NDLA effectively to tackle the issue of drug interdiction and
I'm afraid we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave it. Okay. Mr. Femi Babafemi, the Director of Media and Advocacy of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and Mr. Eze Eluchi, the President of the Civil Society Network on Substance and Drug Abuse, and also Chairman of the West African Network of CSOs on Substance Abuse. Thank you so much for joining us on Pivotal today.